In this video, I'm going to speak about some very interesting DAX tricks that I use it all the time. You're going to love it. Let's start. Trick number 1, applying reverse filters from the facts table to the dimension table. Take a look at my data model right here. So I'm working with this very simple data model. We have the sales table obviously as the fact table, products table as my dimension table, and calendar table also as my dimension table. Now, if you take a look at the nature of the relationship, this is obviously one-to-many, one on the product side, many on the sales side as expected. And the relationship direction is towards from the products table to the sales table. And you can take a look at the relationship direction as well. Now, this simply means that any filter from the sales table will not be able to apply the reverse filter to the products table. That is just not possible. But in case we'd like to do that, how do we make it happen? Let me show you through one of the practical examples that I'm trying to solve. So I have a simple pivot table. In the pivot table, I have the year and the week obviously coming from my calendar table. This is nothing but my channel, and the channel is coming off from my sales table. And here I'd like to show that what is the unique count of the bands of the products. Let's just take a look at the data model once again. So if you just go over and take a look at my products table right here, in the products table, I have the band of the product, which classifies the kind of product. So you could either have a free product, a low product, a mid-segment product, or a premium segment product. I want to take a look at the distinct count of this particular column in the matrix that I just showed it to you. Now, if you take a look at the columns that we have in our matrix visual, we have a few columns from the calendar table. We have one column from channel, which is our sales table. And now we would like to be able to filter a distinct count of the band column from this particular table. How are we going to take these two filters and apply it to the products table? That is just not possible. But that becomes possible through a concept of expanded tables. Let's just write a simple measure. To be able to solve this problem, I obviously will write a simple measure called unique bands, and this is going to be the vanilla distinct count of the bands column in the products table. If I as of now drag this column onto my visual, this is going to give me a static answer of 444, because obviously those two tables, the calendar table and the sales table, would not be able to apply the filter onto the products table. But we can use the expanded table concept. Let's just take a look at how that is done in action. So I'm going to wrap this distinct count in the calculate function. And I'm going to maybe say that, hey, the filter is going to be nothing but my sales table. Now, what this simply means is that although you've applied the sales table as the filter, but this simply means because the sales table is the fact table, the sales table is going to be expanded to have all the columns of the products table and all the columns of the calendar table. Before I commit to this, let's just take a look at the data model. All right, so here is our measure, distinct count of the products band, and in the filter, I have written nothing but the sales table. Although you can physically take a look at the few columns in the sales table, but in the sales table, what is now happening is that because you have used it in the context of the calculate, because of the relationship that has been made here, the sales table now virtually contains all the columns of the products table and all the columns of the calendar table. So all of the columns are collected right here from the products table and the calendar table. And because this table is applied as a filter to the distinct count calculation, it is only going to show you the distinct count of the bands which are there in the sales table. And if you now take a look at our calculation, the calculation actually gives you the right answer, and you get nothing but the distinct count of the bands, which is where a reverse filter has been applied. This is pretty damn awesome. Trick number 2, fixing the nasty totals that Power BI often gives out as wrong. Take a look at the simple pivot table that I'm working here with. We have year and the month, total sales, no problems with the total sales, of course, but we have a max regional sales. What I'm trying to do in this particular calculation is that I'm just trying to see that in any particular region, what was the max sales that happened. I'm going to show you the measure for this, and the measure simply looks like this. So I'm just making a virtual table, and the virtual table is going to contain all the regions, no duplicates. And then against that, I'm just going to find what's the sales for every single region. Whatever is the maximum value, I pick that up and I show that value right here in the visual. Now, obviously, if you're showing max values in the visual, at the total level, you're also going to see the max value. Now, this is not obvious when you're taking a look at the visual, and you're often going to mistake that the visual is summing the max, but it's not showing the max value. Let's just say that hypothetically speaking, at this moment, I would want to take a look at the sum of all the max values and not the max values of the entire year at the total level. At this moment, this total deceptively looks correct, but it's not. Let's just first find out that in case you have a deceptive looking total at the first place, how do you figure out that this is a wrong total? Can we have a way for that as well? For which I'm going to declare a visual calculation, and I'm just going to do a simple running total. Let's just take a look at how that helps us getting to know that our total is incorrect. check. So I'm just going to maybe select this particular visual right here. I'm going to go over to the home tab. In the home tab, I have something called as a new calculation. I select that and I get a visual level calculation. Let the name be calculation, but I'm going to start writing a very simple formula called the running total. So I'm just going to say running sum, not running total, but running sum. And I would want to have the running sum of the max regional sales. So I'm just going to say max regional sales. The axis is going to be rows. So I just want the sum to be calculated downwards like this. Then we have what are we going to do with the blanks, which I can just leave it as default. So I can write that. And then it says that when would you like to reset the running total? That means once I have done the running totals across all of these rows, then I would like to reset here and then start the running total once again for the next year so that I can take a look at the total for the next year as well. And that is going to be done on the highest parent. So there are two parents right here. One is going to be the month filter context. The other one is the year filter context. And I would want that to be for the highest parent. That's what the terminology says. So I'm going to write the highest parent right here and close the bracket and press enter. This is going to give me a visual level calculation. All right, let's just take a look at the results right here. So obviously it keeps on totaling all of these numbers, and you can take a look at all the totals right here next to this. By the time we reach the month of December, the total of all the values prior to December, including December, should have been 9,904, but at the moment the total is 9,740, which is very, very close, so it could be deceptive, but hey, it's not the right total. I want the total to be 9,904. Now that we've understood that how do we find a wrong total, is there a way that we can fix this calculation? The simplest way to fix the calculation when your totals are incorrect is to visually give the filter context at the total level that you are taking a look at with your own eyes. Let me help you understand. All right, let's just take a look at this particular calculation. So I can see that for the month of January, I'm looking at the number 655, 556 for the month of Feb, March is 557, so on and so forth. And I want to calculate the total for these very numbers and display that at the bottom. Now, if I want Power BI to take a look at these very numbers, I have to construct this table. What table? The table that I can take a look at, which is where the first column is the year, the second column is the month, and the third column is nothing but the value. If I'm able to construct this three-columnar table at the total level and then eventually sum these values, I would be able to get the right total. Now, how do we construct this table? Let's just take a look at this measure. So I'm going to go ahead and start to revise my calculation, for which I'm going to start to write my summarize calculation. Now, why summarize? Because my sales table is at the transactional level, but I want to summarize the calculation at the year and the month level and then total those numbers up. So I'm going to say, hey, I would like to summarize my sales table, and the two columns that I'm looking forward to summarize by are year and the month, which is nothing but right here. And that completes my summarize function. Now, in this two-columnar table, which is nothing but the year, the first column right here, and the second column, which is the month column, and the month column is right here. In this two-columnar table, I would like to add a column, which is going to be this particular calculation, for which let's just use the add columns function. So I'm just going to go ahead and start to wrap this formula around the add columns function. And I'm going to say that, hey, I made this two-columnar table, and the next column is going to be a calculation. So I'm just going to call this as max. And the formula for the max is going to be nothing but this particular calculation. And this is already giving me the right answer at the month level. So I'm hoping that this is going to work just fine. And this is going to be nothing but my table. Now, this table has got three columns like we intended. And now, once you get to the total level, at the total level, you're not going to take a look at the entire sales table. You're going to take a look at this table that you have created. And then I can just go ahead and sum up all of these values that I'm taking a look at, through which I can use a very simple sum x function. I'm going to say sum x, hey, sum x, please go ahead inside of every single row of the table that I've just created. And please total up the max column that I have just built. A little formatting would be nice. All right, good to go. Press enter. And you can now see that we get the pretty little total that we were trying to chase earlier a while ago. This is damn awesome. All right, if you're enjoying the video thus far, you're absolutely going to love my courses on Power BI. DAX, data modeling, Power Query, and the M language. These are more advanced courses. Although they start from the basics, we start from scratch and we build up your fundamentals, but then you will have the ability of understanding the logic, and then you can take that logic and even apply it to your own problems. I talk about no jargons, give you a lot of examples in the courses, and hundreds of students have signed up for these courses and they have found it immensely beneficial. In case you're looking forward to level up your Power BI journey, I'd highly recommend that you take a look at the courses. They're going to be super helpful. The link for the courses is down in the description. Let's go. Trick number 3, not writing long if statements, but instead using the max and the min functions very smartly. Take a look at this pseudo example that I have built for you just to help you understand that where would you likely use the if, but hey, you could just do away with the max and the min statement. So I've got this simple table, and the table contains 3 columns. We have the companies column, the loan column, and the income column. And we would like to pay off the loan, but the loan can be only paid off with the income that you have. If you have more income than the loan, then you're going to pay off the entire loan. But if you have less income than the loan, then at least you will pay off the income amount as the loan, for which I would want to write a simple if condition, but we can do that using a very simple min statement. So let's just take a look at how do we write a very simple if statement. So I'm just going to create a new column just to help you demonstrate. I'm going to call this column as pay off. And I'm going to write a very simple min statement. That means what is the minimum that I have to pay? So the minimum is going to be either of the 2 amounts, which is the income or the loan. So I can just pick up the income, or I can pick up the loan, and that is going to be the minimum amount. This is what I need to pay. And what is going to be my balance? So I can just relabel this column as my balance, and that is simply going to be nothing but my loan minus whatever I have paid off as my minimum amount. And that actually gives me the answer. Now this would otherwise have been a very long if statement, but hey, we used a very simple min statement. Let's just take a look at a case for max as well. Let's just say we are trying to give a commission on 10% of the profit, and the profit is going to be sales minus the expense. So let's just calculate profit for a quick second. So I'm just going to make a new column, and I'm going to say that I'm trying to calculate commission eventually, and the commission calculation is going to be based on the profit. So I'm just going to write maybe the profit calculation, which is going to be nothing but my table 2 sales minus expenses, and this is going to give me my profit calculation. Now you can see that at times we haven't really made a profit right here. Now what I can do is I can use a max statement smartly to be able to not calculate profit for all of these negative calculations. So let's just go ahead and for a quick second multiply this with 10%. This is going to give me that what is going to be my profit percentage. Press enter. This is going to give you negative answers, but that's all right. But I can now just go ahead and wrap this in the max statement, and I can say that, hey, why don't you find the max of 2 values? That means either this is going to be bigger or a blank is going to be bigger. That means if you have a negative value, just maybe use a blank. So I can just maybe write another bracket right here that I forgot. And then I can just say, hey, you have to choose between the 2, which is the positive calculation or a negative calculation and the blank. And obviously the blank is going to be bigger than the negative calculation. And hence now if you commit to this, you're going to see that the blanks disappear. Now this is a smart way of writing the max function. Had you not written the max function, you would probably have written the if function instead. Trick number 4. This is one of my favorites, and I see people making a lot of mistakes with this, which is nothing but removing the spillover effects of calculation. Take a look at what I mean. So again, a simple pivot table. We have the year and the month and total sales, and against that we have the YTD of the sales number, which is very, very easy to calculate. Now if I just scroll down on this matrix visual, you're going to see that the YTD numbers show me the right numbers, but unfortunately right after the month of August, which is where the data ends, we have the YTD numbers continue to show me the same number across. Of course, that is because we have the calendar table running up till the month of December, but that doesn't mean that if I don't have the sales, I also want to show the YTD. I don't really want to show this YTD spilling over to the months where I don't have the sales. How do we fix this calculation? One very easy way to fix this calculation is to create a check column in the calendar table. Let's just take a look at how that is done. So I'm going to go over to my calendar table. In the calendar table, I'm going to create a very simple new column, and I'm going to call this column as my sales check column. I'm just trying to see that for every single date, was the sales there in the sales table or not. So for which I need to find the largest date of the sales that happened in the sales table, for which I can use the max function, and I can just reference the sales table and reference the date column, close the bracket and press enter. I get to know that the date in the sales table is going to be 29th of August 2012. Now that's 29th of August. Now I purposely want that to close to the end of the month, so I can force this calculation to go to the end of the month. In case you don't want, you would not use the EO month calculation. I'm using it for now. So this is going to force it to the end of the month, which is 31st of August, and I get that number. Now I have 2 dates in front of me. I have the date, which is right here, and I have this particular date. I'm just going to check that, hey, is this date larger or is this date larger? And depending upon that, I will get to know was the sales present or not. So I can just say if the calendar date is less than or equal to the largest date of the sales table, that means the sales is present. Otherwise, the sales is not present. I get a bunch of trues and falses. Now these trues and falses are going to be used for every single calculation, which is where you have a spillover effect and you want the calculation to stop right where the sales is. One One such example is our YTD calculation, and I'm just going to go back to this calculation and wrap this around in the calculate function, and I'm going to say, hey, I still want to do the YTD calculation, sure enough, but I would want to apply a filter, which is my check filter that I had just created, and that is going to be my calculation. Now, as soon as I commit on this formula, you're going to see that this just disappears. Press enter, and that disappears, and you have a nice running total. Trick number 5, and this is very interesting. Let's just say that you're trying to find out duplicate rows based on a certain criteria, and you would want to do something like a count if type of a calculation. How do you do that? I'm going to share a couple of ways in which I do that. So let's just say that I'm trying to find a combination of the date in the sales table, date and the products which are duplicated. That means on the same date, the same product has been sold more than once. That's what I'm trying to find. If the combination of these two columns are duplicated or not. One simple way of finding that could be using the visual. So if I just go over to the visual right here, I take the date from the sales, I take the product ID from the sales, and I just drag the count of the date. This is an implicit measure, not even an explicit calculation. We're just doing it just to check. And wherever this actually shows you a 2, this is going to be duplicate. So here I can see that on 29th of April, the comb product was done twice. This is one way of doing it. The problem is that you don't really have other columns to take a look at. You're doing it at the visual level. If your table is very, very long, it's very hard to take a look at the entire data. You can't even filter it very nicely. So the other way of doing that, at a caveat of showing it to you, would be using in the sales table and by creating a column in the sales table. I would not recommend doing that, but if you have a shorter table, you can actually do it. So I'm going to make a new column right here. And in the new column, I'm going to write a very simple measure. This is going to be, let's say, my check. And I'm going to declare two variables, one for the date, the other one for my product ID. So I'm going to say my var of my current date. So current date is going to be the very date of this particular table. So sales table, and I will say date column. And then I'm going to say that I want to declare another var, which is going to be, let's say, my product ID. And that is going to be my product ID column from the sales table. Now, these are my current row product ID and current row sales. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe go ahead and write a very simple filter condition. So I'll just say return, and I'm going to write a very simple filter condition. In the filter, I will filter my sales table. In the sales table, I will check for two conditions. My first condition is that please take a look at my date. So my sales date, is that equal to the current row or not? So I can just maybe go ahead and say current date. And this is my condition number 1. And my condition number 2 is take a look at my sales table product ID. Is that equal to my current product ID or not? Was that called product ID or not? All right, these two conditions are there. Close the bracket. Now at the moment you can't commit on this formula because this formula returns you a table and you can't really fit a table in a single cell. However, we don't really want that. We just want to count the number of rows of this table, and that is going to be good enough. If I just maybe wrap this around in the count rows function, I'm just going to be good enough. So if I close the bracket, press enter, I'm going to get a count, and all of these values which are not 1 are actually duplicated, and you can take a look at the duplicates. Take a look at another way of solving this problem by not creating a column in the sales table and using the query view of DAX instead. I'm going to start to write a very, very simple table evaluation of DAX formula that gives me a table instead. So I'm going to go ahead and say something like this. I'm going to use the group by function. So I'll say group by. The table that I'm trying to group by is nothing but my sales table. And the columns that I would like to use in the grouping is going to be the two columns on which I'd like to take a look at my condition, which is going to be my date column, so my sales date, as well as my product ID, and that is nothing but my product ID. The next condition in the group by function is going to be in this two columnar table that you have created. Would you like to create a column? Yes, of course, I would like to create a column, and that column is going to be my check column. And what do I want to do in that particular check column? I just want to count that if you take the sales and the product ID, concatenate that together, are you getting multiple rows or not? So I just want to run a count. So I can just use a simple count AX like an iterator function, and I would like to iterate through every single row of the current table that I have created. So how would I refer this particular table in the count AX function? I can use the current group function. So I can say the current table that I have created, which is referenced by current group, I would like to go in there and just write 1, doesn't matter. And I just want to count the number of rows. So the expression doesn't matter. I can just close the bracket and start to evaluate this. I can click on run, and this actually gives me the same check. Now you can see that at the moment I am getting the same answer on the 29th of April, the COM product was appearing twice. But I can also sort this in a different order, which is where all the values which are more than 1 are going to be up on the top and the ones are going to be at the bottom. You can also use a filter function to remove everything which is not a 1. But hey, let's just use an order by operator instead. So I can say something like order by. That means I would like to sort this in the descending order. And sort what in the descending order? So sort my check column that I have created, which is this particular column, this column. I'd like to sort it in the descending order. And if I now click on run, you're going to see that you are taking a look at the very rows which are on the top. And these are nothing but your duplicate rows, and you can hand it off to somebody. They can take a look at it, why this was duplicated. And for 50,000 reasons, you can actually clean your data.